What if the legendary philosopher's stone wasn't about turning lead into gold, but about transmuting the lead of the human psyche, our deepest fears and limitations, into spiritual gold? Alchemy, often relegated to the realm of historical pseudoscience, holds a secret, a profound understanding of the human mind that resonates deeply with modern psychology. We're not just talking about laboratory experiments or obscure chemical processes. We're talking about a journey of self-discovery, a process of transforming our inner selves. Alchemy, at its heart, is a spiritual tradition deeply rooted in Hermeticism, a philosophy emphasizing transformation and purification. Imagine Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary sage, inscribing the secrets of the universe onto the Emerald Tablet, a foundational text for alchemists throughout the ages. Now, it's easy to dismiss alchemy as an archaic and inaccessible pursuit, shrouded in bizarre symbolism and cryptic language. However, beneath the surface lies a profound understanding of consciousness, a map of the inner landscape that Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychologist, recognized and explored in depth. Jung saw the alchemical opus, the alchemist's great work, as a symbolic representation of individuation, the psychological process of becoming a whole and integrated self. Think of Jung's archetypes, the universal patterns of human experience, mirroring the alchemical imagery of the shadow, the anima animus, and the self. But this isn't merely about theoretical concepts. This is about the lived experience of applying alchemical principles to psychological transformation. What if we could take these ancient symbols and use them as tools for understanding our own minds, for confronting our own inner demons, and for achieving a greater sense of wholeness? This is about providing practical frameworks for real personal growth, offering tangible applications to our modern lives, and turning historical metaphor into practical modern method. So what's the problem that alchemy addresses, the inner ailment it seeks to cure? It's the struggle to understand the unconscious mind, that vast and mysterious realm within us, and to integrate its conflicting aspects. It's the difficulty in confronting the shadow self, the repository of repressed emotions, fears, and desires that we often try to ignore. It's the challenge of achieving psychological wholeness in a world that often feels fragmented and chaotic. But what if alchemy provided a symbolic language, a roadmap for navigating these complexities, and a means of transforming this inner darkness into light? What if alchemical symbols weren't just metaphors, but powerful keys to unlocking the unconscious mind and facilitating self-awareness? Alchemy offers a framework for understanding and integrating the various aspects of our personality, leading to greater self-acceptance and inner peace, but only when we are ready to look deep within ourselves. Therefore, our core thesis is this: alchemy is not just an ancient science or a mystical practice. It's a form of spiritual psychology that offers profound insights into the nature of consciousness and the process of self-transformation. By understanding the symbolic language of alchemy, we can gain access to the hidden depths of the unconscious mind and unlock our full potential for growth and healing. It's a unifying framework that helps interpret otherwise opaque concepts from within our deep subconscious. In this video, we will delve into the core stages of the alchemical opus Negrido, Albedo, Citrinitas, Rubedo, and explain their psychological equivalents: shadow work, purification, integration, and wholeness. We will examine key alchemical symbols like the Ouroboros, the rubis, and the philosopher's stone, decoding their psychological meanings and revealing their relevance to our modern lives. We will also explore practical exercises inspired by alchemical principles, including shadow work prompts, active imagination techniques, and dream analysis methods. So how exactly does alchemy serve as an old map for a new world of the mind? Tags. Let's begin. Thinking Content Part 2. Having established alchemy as a spiritual psychology and previewed our exploration, let us now turn to the very heart of the alchemical process, the stages of transformation themselves. These are not merely steps in a chemical reaction. They are a map of the psyche, a guide to the inner landscape. Think of them as phases in a grand symphony, each contributing to the overall harmony, each presenting its own unique challenges and rewards. The alchemical opus is typically divided into 4 primary stages: Negrido, Albedo, Citronitas, and Rubedo. But what exactly does each of these stages represent, and how do they mirror the journey of psychological transformation? First, there is Negrido, the blackening. In alchemical terms, this refers to the putrefaction and decomposition of base matter, the breaking down of old forms to make way for the new. Psychologically, Negrido represents the confrontation with the shadow self. But what is the shadow self? It is, in essence, the unconscious repository of repressed emotions, fears, and undesirable traits, the aspects of ourselves that we disown, deny, or project onto others. Consider it the dark side of the moon, always present but rarely seen. Facing the shadow is rarely easy. It can be a painful and disorienting process, forcing us to confront aspects of ourselves that we would rather ignore. And yet, it is a necessary step in the process of individuation, the journey towards psychological wholeness. For it is only by acknowledging and integrating our shadow that we can truly become complete. But what happens if we avoid this confrontation? The dangers of avoiding the shadow are manifold. Projection, where we see our own undesirable traits in others. The formation of complexes, which are unconscious patterns of thought and behavior that can sabotage our lives. And a general sense of alienation from our true selves. It's important to remember that the shadow isn't inherently evil. It's simply the unacknowledged parts of ourselves, and like any neglected garden, it can become overgrown with weeds. Following Negrido comes Albedo, the whitening. This stage represents the purification and cleansing of the psyche, the process of releasing limiting beliefs, negative emotions, and destructive patterns. Imagine the alchemist carefully distilling a substance, separating the pure essence from the impurities. Similarly, in Albedo, we begin to sift through the debris of our past, identifying the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that no longer serve us. This often involves practices like mindfulness, meditation, and emotional regulation, techniques that allow us to observe our inner world with greater clarity and detachment. Think of mindfulness as shining a light into the dark corners of our mind, illuminating the hidden patterns and allowing us to choose a different path. Forgiveness, self-compassion, and acceptance become key themes during this stage. This involves forgiving ourselves and others for past mistakes, cultivating compassion for our own suffering, and accepting ourselves as we are, flaws and all. But Albedo is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. Next, we have Citronitas, the yellowing. Often overlooked, this stage represents a transition, a bridge between Albedo and Rubedo. It's a stage of integration and renewed perspective, where we begin to integrate previously rejected aspects of the self and find a new sense of meaning and purpose. Consider it the dawn after a long night, the moment when the first rays of sunlight begin to illuminate the landscape. This involves the development of creativity, intuition, and wisdom, as we tap into our inner resources and discover new ways of expressing ourselves. But Citronitas is not simply about acquiring new skills or knowledge. It's about developing a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. It's about moving beyond the dualistic thinking of black and white, good and evil, and embracing the complexity and nuance of life. Finally, we arrive at Rubedo, the reddening. This is the culmination of the alchemical opus, the achievement of wholeness and self-realization. Imagine the alchemist finally achieving the philosopher's stone, the legendary substance that can transmute base metals into gold. Similarly, in Rubedo, we experience the integration of all aspects of our personality and the attainment of a unified sense of self. But this isn't about achieving a state of permanent bliss or perfection. It's about embracing the full spectrum of human experience, the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and failures. Rubedo is associated with the experience of joy, fulfillment, and spiritual awakening, but perhaps more importantly, with a deep sense of inner peace and acceptance. Therefore, we can see these alchemical stages are not a linear progression, but a cyclical process of death and rebirth, mirroring the continuous evolution of the psyche. Each stage builds upon the previous one, leading to ever greater levels of self-awareness and integration. But what's perhaps most important to understand is that psychological development is never truly finished. There is always more to learn, more to integrate, more to become. And this is where alchemy becomes not just a historical curiosity, but a living practice, a path to ongoing self-discovery and transformation. But how exactly do we begin to navigate this inner landscape? How do we decipher the symbols that point the way? Let us now consider the alchemical symbols as archetypal images that resonate with the unconscious mind. These symbols, potent and evocative, can provide access to hidden aspects of the self and facilitate psychological transformation. Think of them as keys that unlock the doors to the unconscious, revealing the hidden chambers within. While each symbol has multiple interpretations, we will focus on the Jungian interpretation, recognizing that the meaning of these symbols is ultimately subjective and personal. Take, for instance, the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail. This ancient symbol represents cyclical renewal, the eternal return, and the integration of opposites. But what does this mean in psychological terms? Jung saw the Ouroboros as a symbol of the self, the totality of the conscious and unconscious mind. It represents the acceptance of both light and shadow, good and evil, life and death. Consider the Ouroboros as a visual representation of wholeness, a reminder that we cannot truly be complete until we embrace all aspects of ourselves. It's a serpent consuming itself, suggesting an eternal cycle of destruction and creation, a process of constant renewal. But what if we resist this cycle? What if we try to cling to the light and deny the darkness? The result is fragmentation, a sense of being at war with ourselves, a constant struggle to maintain an impossible ideal. The Ouroboros invites us to embrace the totality of our being, to accept the darkness as well as the light, and to find wholeness in the midst of paradox. Then there's the Rubis, the hermaphroditic figure, a symbol of the union of masculine and feminine principles within the psyche. Think of the Rubis as a visual representation of psychological androgyny, the integration of the anima, the feminine aspect of the male psyche, and the animus, the masculine aspect of the female psyche. Jung believed that integrating the anima animus was essential for achieving psychological balance and wholeness. The anima, often represented as a woman, embodies qualities such as intuition, emotion, and relatedness. The animus, often represented as a man, embodies qualities such as logic, reason, and assertiveness. But what happens when these aspects are repressed or ignored? Men may become overly rational and disconnected from their emotions, while women may become overly emotional and lacking in assertiveness. The Rubis invites us to embrace both our masculine and feminine sides, to cultivate a balance of reason and intuition, assertiveness, and relatedness. It's about recognizing that we all possess both masculine and feminine qualities, regardless of our gender identity. Finally, we have the philosopher's stone, the legendary substance that can transmute base metals into gold. This is, perhaps, the most enigmatic and sought-after symbol in alchemy, but what does it represent in psychological terms? The philosopher's stone symbolizes self-realization and spiritual enlightenment, the achievement of psychological individuation, the process of becoming a fully realized and integrated self. Think of it as the ultimate goal of the alchemical journey, the transformation of the lead of the shadow self into the gold of wisdom and compassion. What exactly is involved in creating the philosopher's stone psychologically? It requires confronting our shadow, purifying our emotions, integrating our masculine and feminine sides, and embracing the totality of our being. Therefore, we can see that alchemical symbolism is both profoundly meaningful and intensely personal. We encourage you, fellow seekers, to explore your own associations and interpretations of these symbols, recognizing that their meaning lies in their ability to evoke personal insight and transformation. But now the question becomes, how can we put these principles into practice? How can we use alchemy as a tool for psychological transformation? Let us now turn to some practical exercises inspired by alchemical principles, tools for self-discovery and personal growth. Think of these exercises as experiments in inner transformation, opportunities to explore the depths of your own psyche and unlock your hidden potential. It is imperative that you approach these exercises with curiosity, openness, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. First, let us consider shadow work prompts. These are questions and reflections designed to help bring unconscious content to light, to shine a light into the dark corners of the shadow self. Consider questions like, what qualities do I most dislike in others, and why? This question can reveal projected aspects of our own shadow. What are my deepest fears and insecurities? This can help us to identify the vulnerabilities that drive our behavior. What aspects of myself do I try to hide from the world? This can point to the disowned parts of ourselves that long to be acknowledged. By answering these questions honestly, we can begin to integrate the shadow and reclaim our lost potential. What would happen if you actually faced these questions? It could unlock your future and your mind. Next, active imagination techniques can be implemented. This is a method of engaging with the unconscious through guided imagery and dialogue, a way of entering into a conversation with your inner self. Find a quiet space where you can relax and close your eyes. Imagine yourself walking down a path into a forest. As you walk, notice the details of your surroundings, the trees, the plants, the animals. Eventually, you come to a clearing. In the center of the clearing, you see a figure. This figure may be a person, an animal, or a mythical creature. Approach the figure and ask it a question. Listen carefully to its response. Continue the dialogue, asking questions and listening to the answers. When you are finished, thank the figure and return to your starting point. But what is the purpose of this exercise? It is intended to help to develop a more intimate relationship with the unconscious mind and resolve inner conflicts, a way of accessing the wisdom and guidance that lies within. Finally, there are dream analysis methods, a way of interpreting dreams as symbolic messages from the unconscious. Dreams are often seen as a window into the unconscious mind, a way for our inner selves to communicate with us through symbols and metaphors. To begin, keep a dream journal and record your dreams as soon as you wake up, paying attention to the details, the people, the places, the objects, the emotions. Then, analyze the symbols in your dreams, looking for patterns and recurring themes. What does each symbol represent to you personally? What emotions does it evoke? What memories does it trigger? Finally, interpret the overall message of the dream, considering how it relates to your current life situation. But how can dream analysis help us? It can reveal hidden patterns, unresolved issues, and potential pathways for growth, providing valuable insights into our inner world. It's critical to remember that these exercises are tools for self-exploration, not solutions in themselves. We encourage you to experiment with different techniques and find what works best for you. But remember, the alchemical journey is a lifelong process of learning, growing, and transforming. And as we continue on this journey, the more tools we have available, the better prepared we will be. But what other connections can we draw between alchemy and modern psychology? Are there other ways that these ancient principles can inform our understanding of the human mind? Now that we have explored these principles and exercises, let us turn to some practical case studies to see how alchemical principles translate into real-world psychological transformation. These are not mere historical anecdotes or abstract thought experiments, but rather models for personal application. What we aim to showcase here is the lived experience of psychological alchemy, the tangible impact of these ancient ideas on individual lives. A primary case study to consider is Carl Jung's own exploration of alchemy, particularly his work with the Red Book and his extensive self-analysis. Jung, initially a student of Freud, eventually diverged from his mentor to explore the deeper realms of the unconscious, finding in alchemy a symbolic language to articulate his experiences. How did Jung use alchemical symbolism? He used it to understand his own unconscious processes and to integrate his personality. His Red Book, a private journal filled with visionary experiences and symbolic artwork, became his personal alchemical laboratory. Jung engaged in active imagination, a technique where he consciously entered into dialogue with figures from his unconscious, much like an alchemist interacting with the elements in their retort. He meticulously recorded these experiences, recognizing that they mirrored the alchemical stages of nigredo, albedo, citrinitas, and rubedo. Through this intense self-experimentation, Jung developed many of the key concepts of his analytical psychology. But here's what's truly fascinating. Jung's self-experimentation directly influenced his work with his patients, allowing him to recognize similar patterns and processes in their dreams and symbolic expressions. Indeed, Jung often drew upon alchemical analysis when working with his patients, helping them understand and resolve their inner conflicts. Consider the case of one of Jung's patients, whose identity remains confidential to protect their privacy, whose dreams were replete with alchemical motifs. The patient, grappling with profound psychological struggles, experienced vivid dreams of dark landscapes, decaying matter, and arduous trials, all mirroring the nigredo stage. How did Jung use alchemy to assist this patient? He recognized these symbols as representing the patient's confrontation with their shadow self, their repressed emotions, and their unresolved traumas. Through careful analysis of the patient's dreams and symbolic expressions, Jung guided them through a process of psychological transformation that mirrored the alchemical opus. As the patient confronted their shadow, they began to experience the albedo, a purification of their emotions and a release of limiting beliefs. This process continued through citrinitas, as the patient integrated previously rejected aspects of themselves, and culminated in rubedo, a newfound sense of wholeness and self-acceptance. This process of alchemical transformation, interwoven with analytical psychology, enhanced their healing journey, allowing them to emerge from their psychological struggles with renewed strength and self-understanding. But what about those of us who aren't under the direct care of a trained Jungian analyst? Are these principles still accessible? Let us now turn to a modern-day example of someone using alchemical principles to overcome a personal challenge. Imagine a person struggling with chronic anxiety and depression, feeling lost and disconnected. They discover alchemical psychology and begin to explore its principles, not as a historical curiosity, but as a potential roadmap for self-transformation. Initially skeptical, they delve into shadow work, confronting their deepest fears and insecurities through journaling and introspection. They engage in active imagination, creating a safe space to dialogue with their inner figures, seeking guidance and understanding. They begin to see their anxiety not as an enemy, but as a messenger, pointing them towards unresolved issues and unmet needs. As they consistently apply these techniques, they experience positive outcomes, increased self-awareness, improved emotional regulation, and healthier relationships. They learn to embrace their imperfections, transforming their lead into gold, and discover within themselves a resilience they never knew they possessed. This example, though generalized, highlights the practical applicability of alchemical psychology in everyday life. Therefore, alchemy is not merely a passive theory, but an active practice that can lead to profound personal growth. But what are the key lessons that we can learn from these case studies? From these examples, we can extract key lessons about the transformative power of alchemical psychology. Firstly, alchemy provides a framework for understanding the complexities of the human psyche, offering a symbolic language to articulate unconscious processes. Secondly, alchemical techniques, such as shadow work and active imagination, provide practical tools for self-discovery and emotional healing. Thirdly, the alchemical opus offers a roadmap for psychological individuation, guiding individuals through the stages of confrontation, purification, integration, and wholeness. What these case studies reveal is that alchemy is not just about transmuting base metals, but about transmuting the base aspects of ourselves into something more refined, more valuable, and more authentic. This is why alchemy is not a passive theory, but an active practice that can lead to profound personal growth. As we have seen, Jung and others have used it as a tool. Having seen how alchemy can be put into practice, let us now turn to the alchemical concept of conjunctio oppositorum, the union of opposites, as a central key to psychological integration. This concept involves bringing together seemingly contradictory aspects of the personality, the conscious and the unconscious, the masculine and the feminine, the good and the evil. But why is this integration so crucial, and what are the inherent challenges involved? Integrating these opposites is inherently challenging, as they often create inner tension and resistance. Our ego, our conscious sense of self, often prefers to cling to one side of the equation, rejecting or suppressing the other. This creates a sense of inner fragmentation, a feeling of being at war with ourselves. The key to resolving this tension lies in embracing the paradox, recognizing that both sides are necessary for wholeness, much like the poles of a magnet. The rubis, the hermaphroditic figure, stands as the ultimate symbol of conjunctio oppositorum. Representing the union of male and female, sun and moon, mind and body, and other opposing forces, the rubis embodies the ideal of inner balance and harmony. But how does achieving this inner balance lead to greater psychological wholeness? Achieving this inner balance leads to greater psychological wholeness and harmony because it allows us to access the full spectrum of our human potential. When we embrace both our masculine and feminine sides, our rational and intuitive faculties, our light and shadow aspects, we become more complete, more adaptable, and more resilient. Furthermore, the inherent androgyny of the divine human suggests that transcending the limitations of gender roles and embracing the fluidity of identity is a key aspect of spiritual evolution. So how can we actively work towards achieving this inner union, this psychological androgyny within ourselves? To illustrate the process of integrating opposites, let us turn to the metaphor of the hieros gamos, the sacred marriage found in mythology and alchemy. This symbolic marriage, often depicted as the union of the sun and moon, the king and queen, or other archetypal figures, represents the reconciliation of opposing forces and the birth of something new and transcendent. Consider the Egyptian myth of Isis and Osiris. Osiris, the wise and benevolent king, is murdered and dismembered by his jealous brother Set. Isis, his devoted wife, tirelessly searches for the scattered pieces of his body, remembers him, and brings him back to life. This story is a powerful metaphor for the process of psychological integration. Isis represents the anima, the feminine principle of intuition and relatedness, while Osiris represents the conscious mind. The dismemberment of Osiris symbolizes the fragmentation of the psyche, the scattering of our inner resources. Isis's quest to remember him represents the arduous task of integrating these fragmented parts, bringing them back into wholeness. This remembering requires tireless effort, unwavering devotion, and a willingness to confront the dark forces of the unconscious, symbolized by Set. What is the profound implication of this symbolic reunion? It suggests that by embracing our inner feminine and integrating our fragmented selves, we can achieve a state of psychological and spiritual resurrection, becoming whole and complete. But how does this process relate to our understanding of the anima and animus? The psychological implications of integrating the anima and animus are profound, impacting our relationships, our creativity, and our overall sense of self. Failure to integrate the anima-animus can lead to projection, where we unconsciously project our own inner feminine or masculine qualities onto others, leading to relationship problems and a sense of inner incompleteness. How can we connect with these often neglected aspects of ourselves? Men can connect with their anima through creativity, emotional expression, and cultivating meaningful relationships. Engaging in artistic pursuits, journaling about their feelings, and practicing empathy can help them access their inner feminine. Women can connect with their animus through assertiveness, logical thinking, and pursuing their goals with confidence. Engaging in intellectual activities, taking on leadership roles, and setting healthy boundaries can help them access their inner masculine. By consciously engaging with these aspects of ourselves, we move towards a more balanced and integrated sense of self. But why is this conjunctio oppositorum so vital for our psychological and spiritual development? Ultimately, the importance of conjunctio oppositorum lies in its ability to foster psychological wholeness and self-realization. This process is not about eliminating differences, but about embracing them, finding harmony within the tension, and allowing something new and transcendent to emerge. What we must understand is that the union creates something new, something greater than the sum of its parts, as if the archetypes themselves are breeding within the psyche. Therefore, we encourage you to identify the opposing forces within your own personalities and to explore ways of integrating them, whether through shadow work, active imagination, or simply by becoming more aware of your own projections. This is truly the beginning of the great work. But how does this relate to the darker aspects of our personalities? Let us now introduce the alchemical concept of prima materia, the raw material of transformation, and equate it with the shadow self. This prima materia represents the base, chaotic, and often undesirable substance from which the philosopher's stone is created. But what does this mean for us, psychologically? This connects directly to the shadow self, the unconscious repository of repressed emotions, fears, and undesirable traits. The key here is recognizing that even the most base or negative aspects of our personality contain the potential for growth and transformation. What we often try to bury or disown is precisely what holds the key to our wholeness. But how can we be sure that our shadow self is not taking over completely? Jung famously asserted that there is no light without shadow, highlighting the essential role of the shadow in the process of individuation. Confronting and integrating the shadow allows us to access hidden sources of energy, creativity, and authenticity, like a miner unearthing a valuable vein of ore. So, what happens if we choose to ignore the shadow? Repressing or denying the shadow leads to projection, neurosis, and a lack of self-awareness. The moral dimension here is paramount, the paradox of good needing evil to exist for its definition, much like a coin needing two sides to have value. This highlights the importance of accepting our full humanity, the light and the dark, the strengths and the weaknesses. But how do we even begin to explore this dark side? Thankfully, there are practical ways to identify and engage with the shadow self. Through journaling, dream analysis, and active imagination, we can begin to bring the unconscious to light. Consider journaling prompts like, "What qualities do I most dislike in others?" Or, "What situations trigger my strongest emotional reactions?" These questions can reveal projected aspects of our own shadow. Another approach is to pay attention to our dreams, noting recurring symbols, figures, and emotions. What is the purpose of exploring these uncomfortable aspects of ourselves? It is to embrace the parts of ourselves we have been taught to reject and to move towards a more complete and authentic sense of self. What happens when we are compassionate with ourselves? Self-compassion and acceptance are vital in this process, allowing us to approach our shadow with curiosity rather than judgment. But what is the ultimate goal of transforming our shadow self? Transforming the shadow is analogous to transmuting lead into gold in alchemy, taking something base and turning it into something valuable. The shadow can be a source of hidden strengths, talents, and wisdom. Stories abound of individuals who have transformed their own shadows, overcoming adversity, embracing their imperfections, and achieving greater self-acceptance and fulfillment. Think of the artist who channels their anger and frustration into powerful works of art, or the leader who uses their own past mistakes to guide others. These individuals have learned to harness the energy of their shadow, transforming it into a source of strength and inspiration. So why is it that embracing our shadow is so integral to psychological transformation? In summary, embracing the prima materia, the shadow, is essential as the raw material for psychological transformation. The journey of self-discovery is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole, integrating all aspects of ourselves, even the ones we find most undesirable. Therefore, we encourage you to see your shadow not as an enemy, but as a valuable ally in the quest for self-realization. The potential for transformation lies within even the darkest aspects of ourselves, waiting to be unlocked, waiting to be embraced. But what are the implications of all this? What future awaits us if we embrace our shadow selves? What indeed are the implications of embracing our shadow selves? Can we anticipate a future of psychological equilibrium simply by facing our demons? Let us consider how the seemingly disparate realms of alchemy and modern psychology converge to offer a unique framework for understanding our inner landscapes. Can the outdated concept of the four alchemical elements earth, air, fire, water offer a living, relevant framework for understanding our own psychological landscape, a framework that goes beyond dusty tomes and enters our daily existence? It might seem that in modern times, these elements have been largely relegated to historical and/or fantasy contexts. We see them in video games, fantasy novels, and maybe the occasional New Age shop. But let's tease out the idea that the alchemists were not just proto-scientists, but keen observers of human nature, keen observers who encoded their wisdom in a symbolic language that transcends the limitations of literal interpretation. What if these elements are not to be taken literally as physical substances, but as psychological forces, dynamic energies that shape our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors? To truly appreciate this, we must briefly introduce the traditional understanding of these four elements. Earth represents groundedness, stability, and our sensations, the very foundations of our being. Water embodies our emotions, fluidity, and adaptability, the currents that shape our inner lives. Air symbolizes intellect, communication, and thought, the realm of reason and logic. Finally, fire represents passion, energy, and intuition, the spark of creativity and insight. Traditionally, these elements were seen as fundamental building blocks of the universe, the very fabric of existence, but let us be clear, we will be dealing with this at the symbolic level, not a material one. Let us frame the upcoming discussion as an exploration of how these ancient elemental categories correlate with modern psychological functions, expanding the idea that the elements were psychological forces and are ever present within us. We will preview the key psychological functions associated with each element: sensation, feeling, thinking, and intuition. Understanding these connections can provide a deeper understanding of individual differences, psychological strengths, and potential areas for growth. But how exactly do these elemental categories map onto our everyday experiences? Psychologically, each alchemical element corresponds to a primary way of experiencing and interacting with the world. These elements provide a symbolic framework for understanding our individual psychological preferences and biases, allowing us to navigate the complexities of our inner and outer lives with greater awareness and intentionality. But let us remember, these are useful categories, not binding laws, tools for self-discovery, not rigid definitions. First, let us consider Earth as sensation, the ability to perceive and process sensory information from the physical world. Individuals with a strong Earth element tend to be grounded, practical, detail-oriented, and present-focused. They find solace in the tangible, the concrete, and the observable, drawing strength from the stability of the physical world. Think of a chef who excels at creating sensory-rich dishes, tantalizing the palate with a symphony of flavors and textures. Or consider a craftsman who is meticulous in their work, carefully attending to every detail to create a masterpiece of precision. Earth, therefore, connects to the modern psychology of mindfulness and embodiment, emphasizing the importance of being present in the body, fully inhabiting our senses, and grounding ourselves in the here and now. Next, let us turn to water as feeling, the capacity for emotional intelligence, empathy, and connection. Individuals with a strong water element tend to be compassionate, intuitive, and attuned to the emotions of others. They navigate the world through the lens of empathy, understanding the unspoken nuances of human interaction and creating safe spaces for emotional expression. Imagine a therapist who is skilled at creating a safe and supportive environment for clients, gently guiding them through their emotional landscapes. Or consider a mediator who can resolve conflicts with empathy, understanding the needs and perspectives of all parties involved. Water, in this sense, connects to modern psychology's emphasis on emotional regulation and the importance of healthy relationships, highlighting the power of empathy, compassion, and emotional connection in our lives. Following this, let us explore air as thinking, the ability to analyze information, solve problems, and communicate effectively. Individuals with a strong air element tend to be logical, rational, objective, and articulate. They approach the world with curiosity and intellectual rigor, seeking to understand the underlying principles and mechanisms that govern our experiences. Think of a scientist who is skilled at conducting experiments and interpreting data, meticulously unraveling the mysteries of the universe. Or consider a writer who can craft compelling arguments, persuading others with the power of reason and logic. Air, therefore, connects to modern psychology's focus on cognitive processes and the importance of critical thinking, emphasizing the power of reason, logic, and effective communication in our lives. Lastly, let us examine fire as intuition, the ability to access insights, envision possibilities, and create new ideas. Individuals with a strong fire element tend to be creative, visionary, passionate, and energetic. They are driven by inspiration, fueled by a deep sense of purpose, and empowered to transform the world around them. Imagine an artist who is inspired to create innovative works of art, pushing the boundaries of creative expression. Or consider an entrepreneur who can identify new market opportunities, boldly venturing into uncharted territory. Fire, in this light, connects to modern psychology's exploration of creativity, innovation, and the power of the unconscious mind, emphasizing the importance of inspiration, vision, and a willingness to take risks. Thus, the four elements give a way to map how we engage with the world around us, a framework for understanding our preferences and biases. But let us note, it is less about what type you are and more about using these elements to identify potential weaknesses and blind spots, recognizing where we might benefit from cultivating greater balance. For example, someone very strong in fire intuition might benefit from learning more about earth, sensation, grounding their visions in concrete reality, while someone strong in earth might benefit from embracing fire and following their intuition. But how do we apply this framework in our daily lives? Let us introduce the idea of elemental balance, the integration of all four elements within the psyche, and the modern interpretation of this concept. Most people tend to have a dominant element, a natural inclination towards one way of experiencing the world, which can lead to both strengths and weaknesses. The goal, however, is not to eliminate any element, but to cultivate a harmonious balance of all four, recognizing that each element contributes to our overall sense of wholeness and well-being. But how does this balance manifest in our daily lives? Consider this scenario: an individual struggling with anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, and disconnected from their body, a clear sign of elemental imbalance. Each element could be used to address this imbalance, to restore a sense of equilibrium and well-being. Earth could be engaged through grounding activities, such as spending time in nature, practicing yoga, mindful walking, or simply engaging in sensory activities like cooking or gardening. These practices can help to reconnect with the physical world and reduce feelings of anxiety, grounding us in the present moment. Water, on the other hand, could be explored through journaling, art therapy, or talking with a trusted friend, expressing emotions to release pent-up energy and promote emotional regulation. Air could be channeled to challenge negative thought patterns through cognitive restructuring techniques, such as identifying and reframing irrational beliefs, helping to reduce worry and promote a more balanced perspective. Finally, fire could be ignited through creative activities such as painting, writing, or music, expressing inner passions and generating new insights, helping to reconnect with a sense of purpose and meaning in life. But how do we practically apply this knowledge to ourselves? Let us outline a step-by-step exercise that you, the viewer, can complete to begin exploring your own elemental balance. First, rate yourself from 1 to 10 in each category: earth, air, fire, and water, honestly assessing your strengths and weaknesses. Next, identify the lowest rated category, the element that feels most deficient or underdeveloped. Then, choose an activity that specifically strengthens that element, something that resonates with your interests and abilities. Finally, spend just 20 minutes doing that activity, fully engaging your senses, emotions, thoughts, or intuition, and journal on the experience, noting any shifts in your state of mind or body. In summary, the alchemical elements are useful tools for self-assessment and personal growth, providing a roadmap for cultivating a more balanced and fulfilling life by connecting them to real-world activities. Let us note that this is just one application of alchemical principles to modern life, and viewers are encouraged to research more, exploring the depths of this ancient wisdom for themselves. But what lies beyond this initial assessment? What deeper revelations await those who delve further into the mysteries of elemental balance? What if the seemingly mundane setting of a therapist's office was, in reality, a powerful crucible, a place where unconscious forces collide and transmute? What if the dynamics of transference and countertransference were not merely clinical concepts, but alchemical processes unfolding before our very eyes? Let us embark on an exploration of transference and countertransference, not simply as psychological phenomena, but as the very prima materia of therapeutic transformation, a process fraught with both immense potential and considerable peril. Transference, at its core, is the unconscious redirection of feelings and desires from one person to another, most often originating from significant relationships in our past. Within the therapeutic container, this manifests as patients projecting their past experiences, expectations, and unresolved conflicts onto the therapist. The therapist, in effect, becomes a blank screen upon which the patient unconsciously paints their inner world. This can range from idealization and intense emotional attachment to resentment, anger, or even distrust. Imagine a patient who consistently seeks approval from their therapist, mirroring a childhood need for validation from a distant parent. Or conversely, consider a patient who constantly challenges the therapist's interpretations, unconsciously reenacting a power struggle with an authoritarian figure from their past. These projections, while potentially disruptive, represent a potent force within the therapeutic relationship, a force that can either derail the process or catalyze profound healing. Though psychoanalysis lays claim to the origin of this concept, it was Jung who expanded upon it, applying it to interpersonal relationships outside of the therapeutic setting. Countertransference, the often overlooked counterpart to transference, refers to the therapist's unconscious emotional responses to the patient's transference. Therapists, after all, are human beings, not emotionless automatons, and as such, they are not immune to emotional reactions triggered by their patient's projections. Countertransference can manifest in various ways, from feeling overly sympathetic or protective towards a patient to experiencing frustration, anger, or even sexual attraction. The key lies in the therapist's self-awareness and ability to recognize these reactions as reflections of the patient's inner world, rather than as objective truths about the therapist or the patient. For example, a therapist working with a patient who idealizes them might unconsciously begin to believe in their own infallibility, leading to arrogance or a lack of empathy. Conversely, a therapist working with a patient who projects anger might become defensive or reactive, hindering the therapeutic process. Therefore, therapists must engage in their own analysis, addressing their personal wounds and biases to prevent countertransference from negatively impacting their work. But can these seemingly problematic phenomena actually become pathways to healing? Indeed, both transference and countertransference, when understood and skillfully navigated, can become invaluable tools for psychological insight and growth. These phenomena can be framed as mirroring the alchemical process of transformation within the athanor, the alchemist's furnace. In this analogy, transference becomes the prima materia, the raw, undifferentiated substance that contains the seeds of potential transformation. The therapeutic relationship, with its intense emotional dynamics, serves as the athanor, the vessel in which this transformation takes place. And the therapist, through their self-awareness and skillful interventions, acts as the alchemist, guiding the process towards the desired outcome, psychological integration and wholeness. These projections offer valuable clues about the patient's unconscious dynamics, unresolved issues, and hidden potential. When the therapist can recognize and interpret these patterns, they can help the patient gain a deeper understanding of themselves and their relationships, fostering healing and growth. But how can we further refine this process with the wisdom of alchemy? Let us now turn to the four alchemical elements: earth, water, air, and fire, as a framework for understanding the different types and dynamics of transference and countertransference. Remember, different emotional tones can be classified according to the elements, but we must maintain that this is a symbolic framework for understanding emotional nuances, not a rigid categorization. Earth-based transference, for instance, manifests as a patient's need for stability, security, and concrete support from the therapist. These patients may seek reassurance, practical advice, and a sense of groundedness in the therapeutic relationship. They might frequently ask for the therapist's opinion on practical matters, seeking reassurance about their decisions and a sense of stability in their lives. A patient struggling with anxiety, for example, might constantly seek reassurance from the therapist that they are making the right choices or that everything will be okay. In such cases, the therapist's countertransference might manifest as feeling overly responsible for the patient's well-being, burdened by their needs, or even resentful of their dependency. The therapist might find themselves giving excessive advice, going beyond their role as a facilitator and becoming more of a caretaker. This can create an unhealthy dynamic, hindering the patient's ability to develop their own sense of agency and self-reliance. But what happens when the waters get stirred? Water-based transference, in contrast, is characterized by strong emotional attachments, idealization, or dependency on the therapist. Patients exhibiting this type of transference may experience intense feelings of love, admiration, or neediness towards the therapist. They might express strong emotional feelings, idealizing the therapist as a perfect or all-knowing figure, or becoming overly dependent on their approval. A patient with a history of insecure attachment, for example, might develop a strong emotional bond with the therapist, viewing them as a source of unconditional love and acceptance. The therapist's countertransference, in this case, might manifest as feeling flattered by the patient's attention, overwhelmed by the intensity of their emotions, or even uncomfortable with their dependency. The therapist might unconsciously encourage the patient's idealization, enjoying the feeling of being admired or needed. This can create a blurred boundary, hindering the patient's ability to develop healthy relationships outside of therapy. What then are the intellectual barriers? Air-based transference, on the other hand, takes a more detached and intellectual form, characterized by intellectualization, detachment, or resistance to emotional engagement with the therapist. Patients exhibiting this transference may attempt to analyze their feelings, intellectualize their experiences, or avoid emotional intimacy altogether. They might dissect their emotions with clinical precision, using psychological jargon and intellectual constructs to distance themselves from their feelings. A patient who has experienced trauma, for example, might intellectualize their experiences as a way of avoiding the pain and vulnerability associated with them. In such cases, the therapist's countertransference might manifest as feeling frustrated by the patient's intellectual defenses, disconnected from their emotional world, or even challenged by their analytical approach. The therapist might find themselves engaging in intellectual debates, with the patient losing sight of the underlying emotional issues. This can create a distance in the therapeutic relationship, hindering the patient's ability to connect with their emotions and develop genuine intimacy. But what of the fire that ignites? Fire-based transference, finally, involves the projection of anger, aggression, or idealized expectations onto the therapist. Patients exhibiting this transference may express anger, resentment, or unrealistic demands towards the therapist. They might consistently challenge the therapist's interpretations, express anger and frustration during sessions, or even make demands that are outside the boundaries of the therapeutic relationship. A patient with a history of abuse, for example, might project their anger and resentment onto the therapist, viewing them as a representation of their abuser. The therapist's countertransference, in this case, might manifest as feeling defensive, intimidated, or reactive to the patient's anger. The therapist might find themselves becoming defensive, arguing with the patient, or even avoiding addressing their anger altogether. This can create a power struggle in the therapeutic relationship, hindering the patient's ability to process their anger in a healthy way. To illustrate these elemental dynamics, let us consider a fictional, yet representative, case study based on Jungian principles. Imagine a patient named Sarah, experiencing anxiety and relationship difficulties, seeking analysis with a therapist named Dr. Elena Ramirez, skilled at understanding and utilizing transference. Sarah's initial transference is primarily earth-based, with her frequently as DRG for Dr. Ramirez's opinion on practical matters, such as career choices and relationship dilemmas. She seeks reassurance about her decisions, craving a sense of stability and groundedness that she feels is lacked DRG in her life. Dr. Ramirez initially responds with practical suggestions, but soon recognizes Sarah's underlying need for security. She gently redirects Sarah's focus back to her own feelings and experiences, encouraging her to explore the root causes of her anxiety and insecurity, but soon the waters began to stir. As therapy progresses, Sarah's transference evolves to incorporate water-based element Dr. She begins to idealize Dr. Ramirez, expressing feelings of admiration and even a Dr. sense of dependence. She views Dr. Ramirez as a wise and compassionate Dr. a source of unconditional support. Dr. Ramirez, recognizing the potential for dependency, gently redirects Sarah's focus back to her own feelings and experiences, encouraging her to find validation within herself, but an intellectual detachment begins to take hold. In one session, air-based transference emerges, with Sarah intellectualizing her feelings and resisting emotional intimacy. She begins to analyze her emotions in a detached way, using psychological jargon she has picked up from her reading. She avoids vulnerability, prefer Dr. to dissect her experiences rather than feel them. Dr. Ramirez recognizes this as a defense mechanism, a way for Sarah to protect herself from the pain of her past. She gently encourages Sarah to connect with her emotions, inviting her to explore the underlying fears and beliefs that are driving her intellectualization, but a fire threatens to erupt. Later in the therapy, fire-based transfer Dr. surfaces, with Sarah projecting anger and frustration onto Dr. Ramirez. She becomes critical of Dr. Ramirez's interpretations, questioning her competence and expressing resentment during sessions. Dr. Ramirez recognizes this as a station of Sarah's shadow self, the part of her that she has disowned and repressed. Dr. Ramirez remains grounded and empathetic, create Dr. a safe space for Sarah to express her anger without judgment. Through consistent self-aware Dr. Dr. Ramirez recognizes and processes her own feelings without projecting them back onto Sarah. Through Dr. Ramirez's self-awareness and understanding of the elements, she is able to navigate these transference dynamics, facilitating Sarah's psychological growth. Dr. Ramirez uses the transference as an opportunity to explore Sarah's unconscious patterns and unresolved issues, helping her to gain insight into her past relationships and develop healthier coping mechanisms. Over time, Sarah gradually integrates her shadow self, develops emotional regulation skills, and forms healthier relationships outside of therapy. But are there dangers to this process? Indeed, ethical considerations are paramount in working with transference and countertransference, because there exists a very real potential for harm if these powerful forces are mishandled. The therapeutic relationship inherently involves a power imbalance, with the therapist holding a position of authority and influence. This makes it crucial to maintain clear boundaries, ensuring that the patient's well-being is always prioritized above the therapist's own needs or desires. If the elements flare up due to poor handling, the consequences can be devastating. Therapist self-awareness, ongoing training, and adherence to ethical guidelines are essential in preventing exploitation or boundary violations. Therapists must be acutely aware of their own unconscious biases, emotional triggers, and potential for countertransference. They must engage in regular self-reflection, seeking supervision or consultation from colleagues to identify and address any potential blind spots. Ignoring this advice and failing to contain these powerful forces can be catastrophic. Consider, hypothetically, a therapist who becomes sexually involved with a patient due to unresolved countertransference issues. The therapist might rationalize their behavior by claiming that they are helping the patient or that the patient initiated the relationship. However, such behavior is a clear violation of ethical boundaries and a profound betrayal of the patient's trust. The consequences can be devastating for the patient, leading to emotional trauma, psychological distress, and a loss of faith in the therapeutic process. It can also result in ethical sanctions, legal repercussions, and damage to the therapist's career. Therefore, the ethical responsibilities of therapists in working with transference and countertransference are clear. Prioritize the patient's well-being above all else, maintain clear boundaries, and seek ongoing training and supervision. Remember the alchemical parallel. Working with these volatile forces can yield incredible benefits, but it can also be incredibly dangerous if handled without care. But we have only just begun to scratch the surface of this complex interplay. The subtle nuances of transference and countertransference continue to challenge even the most experienced practitioners, underscoring the need for future research and continued dialogue on this multifaceted topic. And we're just scratching the surface. What we'll discover next is even more shocking. As we draw our exploration to a close, having traversed the complex landscape of alchemy and its profound connections to modern psychology, let us synthesize the key insights we've uncovered on this transformative journey. We acknowledge the intricate nature of these subjects and express our gratitude for your engagement in this shared exploration. Throughout this journey, a central theme has emerged. Alchemy, far from being a mere proto-science obsessed with transmuting base metals, is in its essence a spiritual psychology, a symbolic language for understanding and transforming the human psyche. We've seen how seemingly disparate elements, the alchemical furnace, the symbolic processes, and the archetypal figures converge to reveal a roadmap for psychological individuation and wholeness, a path towards transmuting the lead of our unconscious into the spiritual gold of self-realization. Returning to our initial question of whether alchemy can offer valuable insights into the human psyche, we can now definitively answer with an emphatic yes. The journey here has shown that alchemy is a symbolic language for accessing the hidden depths of the unconscious mind, a language that, when decoded through the lens of Jungian psychology, reveals the profound potential for personal transformation. Remember the Ouroboros, that ancient symbol of the snake eating its own tail. It's not just a curious image, but a potent representation of the cyclical nature of psychological integration, the continuous process of confronting and assimilating the shadow self. Or consider the rubis, the alchemical hermaphrodite, a visual testament doctor. Oh, the integration of opposing forces within the psyche, the union of the conscious and unconscious, the masculine and feminine. Doctor. Jung helped bring value to these old symbols as a symbolic key to unlock the unconscious. This understanding of alchemical psychology extends far beyond the confines of the therapist's office. It provides a framework for understanding the search for meaning, the pursuit of wholeness, and the potential for human transformation in all aspects of modern life. Whether it's navigating relationships, pursuing a fulfilling career, or deepening one's spiritual practice, the principles of alchemy can serve as a guide, a compass pointing towards the integration of opposing forces, the confrontation of the shadow self, and the realization of one's full potential. Alchemical psychology is a way of viewing the self with deeper meaning and how it can evolve. And remember, the journey of self-discovery is a lifelong process, a continuous unfolding of potential, a never-ending quest for inner gold. Through this exploration, we have gained a deeper appreciation for the profound connections between alchemy and psychology, two seemingly disparate traditions that, when viewed together, offer a powerful and transformative framework for understanding the human psyche. We can now appreciate the symbolic language of alchemy as more than just historical oddities, recognizing them as potent keys for unlocking the hidden depths of our unconscious minds. With this knowledge, you are now empowered to embark on your own alchemical journey of self-discovery, emotional healing, and personal transformation. The Philosopher's Stone is not a substance to be found, but a state of being to be achieved, the realization of your own inner gold, that radiant and incorruptible essence that lies dormant within each and every one of us. As above, so below. As within, so without. Transmute yourself, transmute the world. We encourage you to continue your exploration of alchemy and psychology by delving into Jung's collected works, exploring primary alchemical texts like the Emerald Tablet, experimenting with shadow work prompts, or seeking out a qualified therapist trained in Jungian analysis. Check out the description for more links, and do share your own experiences and insights in the comments below. As always, we are eager to hear your thoughts and perspectives on this fascinating topic, and be sure to subscribe for more content as we continue to plumb the depths of esotericism. It is clear that alchemy offers a unique and powerful framework for understanding the human psyche and achieving psychological wholeness. We set out to explore the hidden connections between alchemy and psychology, and we have now demonstrated that these two traditions are deeply intertwined, offering profound insights into the nature of consciousness and the process of self-transformation.